Okay.
Yeah, so Macropop is here. Anytime you see Macropop, no, it's serious business. It doesn't come until you can spend money, so that's a good side. So yeah, so Keone will introduce today's topic and take it away.
Yeah, so I just want to start. Everyone here who's participating, do you guys have a workbook? Thumbs up. Yes. Everyone's got one. Everyone got pens. Okay. Awesome. And also start to identify a partner, because there's going to be some parts of this exercise where I want for you guys to critique each other. All right. So many of you guys got a chance to step into my last chat, which I was just talking about the fundamentals of really great products. This is from over a decade of experience working in retail, working for corporate, working institutionally, working for startups, doing advisory work for VCs, being a scout for VCs, working as a CMO, working as a chief product officer. I am bundling all of that experience into basically a fundamentals workshop. I think somebody here had mentioned there were some UX elements that they saw in the process. Was that you? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. A product is ultimately a story. And you need to have your users, their intent, aligned with the product and the experience, aligned with fundamentals for business. If you do this process right, this will help you get your first paid user, or this will help set you up to have the kind of engagements that you need to have when you want to raise capital. I'm going through that right now. The startup that I'm working with, we are on track to raise about $2 million. So I'm speaking from experience. I also mentioned a few things just in general and why I think you guys are in a very pivotal time in history for Africa. As you guys know, we've got this war kicking off. And quite possibly, the safest continent on the planet is Africa. What does that mean? I made a statement last time that I was here. I said that the West innovates at the speed of greed, and we innovate at the speed of need. We are watching our economies throughout the entire continent evolve from an industrial state into a service state. What does that mean? That means that by 2050, we are going to have the most mobile users in the world. They're going to be under the age of 30. They're going to be technically proficient. They're going to be mobile first. They're going to have a natural distrust of utilities and existing systems. And that means there is an incredible opportunity to design a product that serves our continent. I don't know if you guys just saw this, but YouTube made more money than Apple TV, Netflix, CNN, all the way down the line. One of the problems that we've always had, being of the African diaspora, is that we have not been able to tell our own stories. I mentioned a book that I think everyone here who is involved in the product should check out. It's called Algorithms of Oppression. It talks about why our technology does not serve us. On the counterpoint to that, if you look at all of the major technology adoption that has happened across the world, it has happened on the back of our culture. Whether it's our music, Spotify, whether it's the way that we celebrate and have humor and dance and enjoy ourselves, TikTok, whether it's how we engage in community, AOL Instant Messenger. Like, I can go down the list, and just about every single major social platform has leveraged our culture, has stolen our story, and nobody is getting paid for it. So as we go through this process, and I want for you guys to bring the products that you're working on today, I want for you guys to bring that into this process. My goal is to help you guys refine, to be able to dig down into your product story, to really build alignment, and alignment for revenue. This isn't a pretty process. This isn't, oh, I just want for you guys to learn a few things. No, you guys are gonna learn a few things on the job, but this is supposed to help position your product for revenue. Good? All right, sweet. So, I'm gonna do a real quick workshop overview, and I'm gonna share with you guys what the agenda is gonna look like. So there's three primary exercises that we go through. The first exercise, community-scapes. It is how we define personas, but also how we define personas as it relates to a community. Every product that exists now is two things. It's a media company and it is a community. It is your job to be able to identify the three primary personas that you have in your community. We're only going to work on one today, but if you look in your books, there is 3 pages. So it is going to be your task to go home, think about what those other 2 personas are like, and figure that out. Then we're going to go into our brandscape exercise. This is going to give us a foundation for how the brand personality exists. So this is literally the same exercise that I do when I've done $20,000 branding engagements, when I've done $75,000 brand engagements, when I've launched $150,000 software apps, when I've launched $2 million campaigns. Same principles, and I'm going to walk you guys through it. That process is going to end with a positioning statement. I want for you to be able to walk out of here with a clear understanding of who your customer is, what kind of utility or impact that you deliver, how you deliver that from a cultural context, and the impact that you deliver. The goal is not for you to walk away with a polished statement. The goal is to give you an anchor for you to iterate on this statement. This is one of those statements that helps you craft a pitch. It's one of those statements that as you grow helps you set a mission statement and a vision statement. But it is important and it is the anchor of your story. The last exercise that we're going to do is called a revenue scape. And what we are going to do is we are going to define what what it takes and what your product needs to get to revenue. Straight line. Very, very clear. Like no, no distractions by signing objects. What is your feature? What do you need to sell your feature? Do you have the infrastructure to take on a paid client? And if you don't, what are those things that you need to build to get you there? We're going to end with a share and sharpen. I would like for each of you to stand up at the end of this session and be able to share your positioning statement. We're all going to take that in and we're all going to give feedback. And then at the end, I'll be here for some time. So you guys can, if you guys have questions, because this should bring up questions. If you have blind spots, this should create awareness for you that, you know what, maybe I don't have all the pieces in alignment. And I'm gonna be here just to give you that feedback, whatever questions you might have, whatever needs you might have, happy to deliver that to you. And then that'll be the end of today's session. Sound good? Any questions? Everybody's got their product in mind? Yeah? Yes? Anybody that doesn't have a product here? You need a workbook? Here you go, bro. Everyone got pens, pencils, lead? Excellent. All right. So let's get into it. We are going to start with the very first exercise, and it is called a community scape. Now, I treat community scapes as an exercise that allows for us to understand the macro to the micro. The macro is a community, and that community is composed of 3 profiles. Okay? You have the catalyst. This is your first mover. This is your early adopter. They don't have any kind of social qualms about doing or exploring a product and doing it publicly. Think about the first people that went on Twitter and was like, hello, I'm on Twitter. I just ate a sandwich, right? These are the first TikTok dudes that started going out in the street and recording themselves dancing. These are your early adopters. Your story, the product story, not the utility, is what sells that proof of concept. And it is what anchors and gives you validation on your brand narrative for your product. Then you have your legitimizer. They are the social proof engine. They hold institutions or communities credible. Their endorsement is your distribution architecture in trust-based markets. What does that mean? These are the influencers that use the product. These are the vendors that use your product. These are the community associations that use your product. So they are just as important as your primary user. Next, you have your utility adopter. They scale the product. They are the revenue engine. They adopt the product because it provides a clear and reoccurring economic problem. Their retention behavior is your LTV value. So who is that? That is the wallflower that comes to the club whenever this DJ spins every single night. They pay, but you don't necessarily see heightened engagement. But their attendance is validation. These 3 profiles are what you need to understand are going to drive your product. And collectively, they build a community. We're not going to get into community. That's a whole other thing. But this is the foundation for you to understand who my product is for, what members of the community are going to be a part of it, are going to engage. And that is going to give you the framework to then dive into providing community value. Does anybody here have a product that's launched? No? How many users do you have? 750. Have you segmented them? All right. We should have a conversation. And was this the product that we saw? Last week? About how many users? Still early, right? 200, okay, yeah. So one of the things that you guys want to start to do, like I said, once you get beyond your first 100 users, start to segment their behavior. Start to understand in which of these categories these folks might be, because then you can dive into them and do research and really start to get your insights, right? For those of you that have yet to launch, this is a thesis of sorts, right? You don't actually have a product or a product user that you can pull data from. So you're gonna have to conceptualize this. And I assume for many of you, you probably built a product thinking about yourself as a user, which is fantastic. But what you need to do is you need to actually go out and validate this. Who is someone that you know that would use this product? Interview them. Interview them using the same questions. It's super important. Validation is going to be one of those processes that is going to supercharge your ability to build a product that really delivers value. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to build the first persona. And this persona, again, right, this is a catalyst. This is the early adopter. So you have 4 quadrants. First quadrant, demographics. Define them. For many of you guys understand it says, what are the basics? Age, gender, race, location, region. Write these down. Those are the fundamentals, right? But when you get through those, here are some that you should be looking at. What is their primary income source? Why is that important? If your user is a student, you're not going to be able to sell them a luxury experience, right? If your user is a teacher, they're probably not going to look for a luxury experience. If your user is a banker, maybe, but they're not going to want necessarily a cheap or a low value service, right? So understanding the income source of this user is going to allow for you to understand what we call price elasticity. That's product market fit. That's how much are they going to be willing to pay for this thing that needs to be in alignment. The next thing, what devices are they on? And which do they reach for first, right? Are they Android user? Do they have a host of devices? Do they have 2 phones? Do they have an iPad and a MacBook Pro? Do they have a MacBook Neo? Do they have a MacBook Pro M5, right? Understanding the technology that your users are on is going to give you the clarity to understand the level of complexity that you can deliver in your software. Understanding what areas or states that they operate in, right? We're drilling down very, very specific, right? But for many of you, maybe it's much larger. Are you joining us, sir? Come get, do we have another one out here? I got it. Education level and what language do they study? This is super key when it comes to marketing. Understanding the level, the literacy level will dramatically change the way that you position or even put together a campaign, a tagline. What formal or informal professional communities do they belong to? Are they in a fraternity from college, right? Are they in a motorcycle group? Are they in a Boda Boda group? Do they run these streets at night? Who knows? But understanding that, super important. And then How many people financially depend on them? Right? Do they support the family? Do they support the parents? Right? That's something that's very common in our community. But that will allow for you to understand what kind of budget that your user is dealing with. Right? So I'll give you a couple minutes to fill that out, and then we'll move on to the story. And if you guys have any questions, please raise your hand, shout out. I'm here. Yeah. Yeah. What's up?
So, last product kind of we deal directly with businesses.
Yeah.
Like this insurance companies, they insurance. Our products, okay, we don't go directly to our customers, so we have to businesses. So, I don't know, do we notify the end user or the product or they really know who we are trying to?
Right, so if your technology fulfills a utility for a user who is not your primary contact, right? Like in this case, the bank consumer, that's your primary user. Your first point, right? Because you can have a double-sided marketplace. Which, who do you go with first? In the double-sided marketplace, you go first with the product that somebody wants to buy. That's your first user. And then you think about the second user, in this case, the buyer, that now becomes your second person on the big value, right? Now, the challenge is filling up the buckets on both of those sides. Now, that's actually a branding and marketing challenge. We can talk about that later. But right now, it's who is going to provide the primary value for your product? That's your first primary user. Secondary doesn't even matter if you can't get that first primary user. Okay. We are going to move on to the next quadrant. This is a story. This is a qualifying narrative. For some of you that have done UX, this will be very familiar for you. What you need to understand is what is this user's story and what in that story qualifies them as a user. If I'm doing an app for bus transit, my user isn't the dude that has the Ferrari or the dude that already has a motorcycle or the dude that rides his bike every single day. My user is someone that has to travel to work and needs a bus to get to that location, right? So you need to tell that story within that context. So you need to understand what is the specific situation, what is the breakdown for that user, and what makes them understand that, hey, I need a better situation. If we're using this bus routing app, for example, what is the challenge? I can never tell when the bus arrives. Or maybe can't pay a consistent wage for this bus or a fare for this bus. Or maybe I need to know where this bus could take me because I want to explore someplace, right? Those are very specific situations that identify the need for the user. You should have that. What's your product?
Minister, sorry, I'm not gonna call it.
It's a
It's a BTC product.
a BCC product. What does it do? What's the utility?
Guys can simply go from the crypto to
Sorry.
I'm saying guys can easily go from like for other cash outs, the crypto to local currencies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would be a circumstance for which a user would say, I need to go and search and find another off-ramping situation?
that's kind of driving just on my road.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we say we have a user who is like a trader. Let's take for example a trade on Binance, right?
Yeah.
So they get on Binance, they have to make sure they have the right address. Two, they have to wait for the executive contract. Let's say it takes 45 minutes.
Yeah.
After that, they have to convert whatever they have to another, let's say stablecoin, like from USDC to TND, from cellular to USDC on base. They have to create a P2P order for them to receive that.
Yeah.
So where we now come in, rather than the payment to be the kind of time that they take before they receive their local currency or rather their fiat. And also the kind of user experience in between, from when they deposit their funds to when they make the order and to when they receive their funds. So where we now come in is now on the experience side, in that someone has to just have one wallet address. We give one wallet address, regardless of the chain. You deposit your funds, you confirm it instantly. You do the shopping in the background, so that's why it's instant. And the settlement is also super instant and fast. So in that, we're saving the user time and we're also improving the experience generally.
Yeah. So circumstance is Binance's crappy translation, basically.
Yeah.
There's all of these limitations. There's time. You know, you're basically a double-sided market, right? You put up this exchange amount. Someone has to accept that for that to happen. Then you have to wait for the transaction to be completed, right? Like it's a whole process. That's the story that you need to be able to identify, right? What have they already tried, paid for, or abandoned? That's going to give you identification to your competitors. And sometimes your competitors may not be software products. They could be OTC counters, right? So you need to be able to be clear on what that utility is and then how your values are going to shift. Understanding what their day looks like at the moment the problem is most painful. This is understanding the life cycle of your customer, right? When are they being prepared, or when are they preparing to make that particular transaction? What is leading up to that? How can you step in leading up to that particular process and influence them to check out your product versus somebody else's? Super duper important. How do they hear about the last tool or product that they voluntarily adopted, right? So what we're doing here is you're trying to understand the culture and the experience and the life cycle behind your user, because that is what gives you insights. I'll give you an example. I was doing market research for YouTube. YouTube wanted to validate the pricing that they had in the United States. So YouTube sent me on a fact-finding mission. What did I do? I did what is called ethnographies. We followed 3 key user types and we followed them around for an entire day. We didn't ask them questions. We didn't prompt them to do anything. We just sat there and observed. When they wake up in the morning, one was an Iranian medical student. He used YouTube specifically to study for his medical degree. He was 3rd year, I believe. And what he had discovered is the way that they educate in his medical school, the way that they lecture doesn't work for him. But his ability to use YouTube, paid, and find specific lectures that cover the information in a way that was most natural for him is what worked, right? So I'm sitting there watching him wake up in the morning, get his study on, hang out with his mom, play old television shows and songs that his mom grew up with in Iran, come back home after class, watch music videos while he's eating, study, jump back into it. I will watch every single process of his day without asking. And then I'm walking through all of the different steps, all of his explorations, all of the times where he was choosing to go from one media channel or the other, and then compiling that into a psychographic analysis. What is he thinking in his head? What is he hearing? What is he seeing? And then what are the insights that align with that, right? Now, I have to then take these insights and sit down with YouTube and say, hey, you're actually delivering great value, or you're not delivering enough value, or maybe this feature would be super beneficial for them, right? Those are the kind of brand insights that come from digging deep into understanding what is happening in their full world, the totality. Something that I talked a little bit about last week, I'm not going to get too much into it, is the concept of culture market fit, right? I believe that culture market fit is what allows for your product to scale. So all of these examples that I shared with you before, dancing on, African American and African dancing and expressions that blow up on TikTok. That is a culture market fit, right? Now, they have taken that culture market fit and they have moved away from it, because how dare someone from the African diaspora be the most popular person on this platform? But that culture market fit was what allowed for that platform to take off. So you need to be finding what your culture market fit is. In that, super simple, local founders, figures, or businesses. What are the institutions? What are the influencers? What are the vendors that validate you? What do they express in proof of value by using your product? Another one that kind of falls into the marketing bucket. What are they saying? What are they expressing? Right? And then lastly, what would they need to believe about a product before telling somebody something else or about it, right? For example, what would be the killer experience that would make them call their home and be like, hey, bro, you need to get on this right now. Drop by next. No, seriously. What is that aha moment? Again, thinking about the life cycle of that experience. Okay? Give you guys a couple minutes to write that down, and then we'll move on to the next. Yo.
Do you think that many people start startups or businesses without looking at wanting, like what would people say?
So
You know,
I do understand. So here's an example. Just Google it, right? Just search that up. Just Google it. I need a paper copy. Get a Xerox. I need a paper tissue. Get a Kleenex.
I think it's just doing startups and they don't really feel.
But that's a dangerous thing, right? So I'm gonna actually dive into that. Subjectivity and objectivity, okay? This is a super important perspective to have. Design is the rendering of intent. What does that mean? That means the thing that you are building, the thing that you are crafting, it sits in the intent of a user, not yourself. You may be an example for the user, but you need validation, or else it's just a wild and crazy dream, right? There are many artists that we've seen that feel like they are the audience. And many times when you see that album crash, or that outfit that just doesn't hit. Or someone that thinks they're an incredible chef and you taste your food and you're like, not a chief, right? That is having a subjective perspective. You need to have objectivity to understand what a great product is. You need to be able to step out of your own biases, out of your own emotions, and step into the mind of your audience, of your users, and to be able to understand what they truly need. There's the famous quote, Henry Ford, who said, if I would have given everybody what they wanted, I would have just given them a faster horse. Right? What he did is he understood the need, but he also understood the experience in their lives. And that allowed for him to have the insight, no, this is a mechanized carriage. This is something that's going to allow for them to carry another individual in comfort. That's going to allow for them to carry large volume of material with ease. Something that's going to allow for them to not have to worry about having a stable for the horse. Subjectivity, objectivity. All right, we're moving on. Needs. Now, in this quadrant, it should be a very, very clear understanding. Yeah. You should be able to identify each step that they are executing to get to that thing. Download a wallet. Buy crypto. Have an exchange. Have an account on finance. Every single one of those steps is a job to be done, right? Good products eliminate jobs to be done. Great products leapfrog. So you guys should all understand, what is the starting state of my user? Where do they start when they're trying to do something? What are the steps that they have to intake? Endure to arrive at job done. Next questions. This is, again, understanding the experience in the life cycle. Where do you switch between tools? Where does your user switch between tools? Do they got to switch between wallets, hop on Binance, right? Channels. I like getting my information from Reddit, but I engage about it on Twitter, right? Like, all of those things give insights into opportunities. There's a ripe opportunity right now for a social network. There is an even riper opportunity for a social network, specifically correlated to the African diaspora. There's a reason you have subreddits called Black Twitter, because there is a whole subgroup of individuals that understand that engagement mechanic, but fundamentally hate the platform, which is why they had to make a subgroup to address their needs. Please believe the person that builds a social network that thrives in Africa pulls the African diaspora from everywhere else, right? African Americans in America control $1.5 trillion of value. That's just in America. Okay. Also, paying attention to what they hear and they see. What are they complaining about most? And these are the channels that you already know: WhatsApp, Meetup, right? You can literally grab a bot, crawl through an entire WhatsApp group, and have highlights for certain keywords like I wish this, or why doesn't that, right? Those are really easy ways to validate ideas and concepts. And then lastly, for yourself, being a product lead, what are you seeing in others? What's happening in your network? Who's experimenting? What are you experimenting with? Every time I travel and I see someone younger than me, I always ask, what's your favorite app? What channel do you hate? What's your favorite hate watch on social? Those insights allow for you to expand your vista and give you clarity on what the opportunity is. And you can take that insight and imbue it into your product. Okay? The last and most significant quadrant is solutions. This is about what are your feature candidates of all of the things that you could build. Should you build it? That's the ultimate question. Because what you say no to is what determines your success. It's not what you choose to add, it's what you choose to remove. It's the simple Pareto principle. 20% of the features that you build are going to drive 80% of your revenue. We need some more. So what do you take with all these insights and the story? Potential features. Pay attention to the things that happen the most. What single action gets repeated? Think about contextual situations. My product can work if you're offline or off-chain. Puts you and positions you in a completely unique space. Think about the shareable output, right? When you do this thing, who sees it? Community elements. Notifications. Does anybody want to know why there's a Republican MAGA group in the United States? Yeah. It's simple. It's actually technology. It's notifications. The average MAGA Republican is a boomer. They're over 50. They have tons of disposable income. They have phones that are way too advanced for what they need, so much so that they can't turn off their notifications. So all of the media channels learned this about 7 years ago. So what did they do? They started pumping out short form content with memeable highlights that would show up on your device every hour. Every single day, every single hour that they have their phone. The Democrats do this, Joe Biden that, Obama is really a gangster. All the craziness. None of it's real, but it was never about it ever being real. It was about tying an emotion to a notification. A couple more. How to get started without entering a lot of data or going through a long onboarding process, right? And a lot of this seems pretty standard, but you would be surprised. Payment entry points that match how they already have money. Meeting your user where they're at. The most important, though, and I want for all of you here with the product to think about this is, what is your trust signal? Sometimes it's as easy as a testimonial. You can get that as easy as doing an interview. It's a usage number. I've got 700 users. A local reference. Look at this institution here in your local community. They're on our platform. That's how you know you can trust us, right? Trust signals are super important. That is trust infrastructure that sets the stage for your user before they even touch your product. Okay, I'll give you guys a couple minutes to finish that up, and then we'll move on to the next episode, exercise. Yeah. While you're writing that, does anybody have any questions? No? About 30 more seconds and we'll move on. All right, y'all, that's time. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a quick reminder. This is the first profile. This profile is your catalyst, right? Remember, they're your early adopter. They're gonna be the first to experiment, to try your product. They're super key. The next user that you have, and there's a second page for that, that is your legitimizer. They validate your product. They are a social proof engine. They have institutional or community credit. So that's an influencer, it might be a partner. KBA, for example, right? Their endorsement is your distribution architecture in trust-based markets. And let's be clear here, we are in a trust-based market. Your last user, this is your utility adopter. They scale your product, right? They are now your revenue engine. They adopt because the product solves a clear, reoccurring economic problem. Their retention behavior is your LTV signal. So I used an example of the club and we're going to bring it back to that. So the product is a club. Who's the first people that are going to show up to the club? Those that love to get down. Those that want to stand in front of the speaker. Those that don't necessarily care what DJ is happening as long as the music is right and the vibes are right. That is your first user. Your second user, they are your legitimizer, right? Who are they? They are the influencers. They are the DJs. They are the local shotsies, right? They are the ones that have the social proof. You know when they're at a party, that party's legit. And lastly, you got your utility adopters. right? In a club context, you know who this would be? This would be the big brands. This would be a television station. Ah, what's going on at this party? Why does everybody love this party? I want to find out more about it. That's who they are. They are white cap. We want to sponsor your event, right? They drive the revenue. You need a worksheet? What the hell? Couple more left.
Thanks.
And the last one. Welcome. Okay. So real quick, show of hands. Did you guys, are you guys able to understand more deeply about the value of a persona? The kinds of questions that you should be asking and looking for? If you don't have a user, use this persona to validate your product. You should be able to do that in a week. Find one person who would use your product. Validate this, right? Now, I take the IDEO approach. Is anyone here familiar with IDEO? IDEO? They're a famously large and innovative design studio based in the United States. I got a chance to meet with their head of product about 4 years ago. And we were talking about this process. And she told me something that I now adhere to, which is, it's easy to have your ideal customer profile, your ideal persona, but it's even better to have a real person sit into this role. It allows for you to anchor into the reality of a lifestyle and experience. So everyone here should be able to take this persona and validate it. That's your homework for this week. Okay? Once you get that validation, then you can move on to the next profile and the subsequent one. Okay. So now let's move on to our next exercise. Brandscape. Now this is brand ID and positioning. Okay? Now, this is an extremely underrated exercise. This is the exercise that I use that sets the foundation for any design engagement that I've had. I've designed car decals. I've designed biking fashion outfits. I've done Super Bowl commercials. I have worked on KD, Nike advertising campaigns. I have designed Adidas shoes for Snoop that didn't get picked up. But other things happened with Snoop as a result. Point is, every single process of design that I begin, I start with this exercise. Okay? It's part of culture market fit. And what it allows for you to do is to anchor into the expression that you want for your product, but to do so with real language, with something that you can iterate on. For example, if someone's like, ooh, I want to have like this cool, futuristic, friendly brand. How would you start to do design research around that? It all starts with language. Futuristic, right? Friendly. What are adjectives of friendliness? Warmth, compassion, engagement, calm. These are all definitions that you can then use in your design research. And then in that research, you will then be able to identify certain characteristics that you say, oh, I like the way this logo had these soft curving lines. Oh, you know what? Circle and roundness actually is more human. These are particular design characteristics that I want to use for this particular expression of a brand. I want for my UI to feel really friendly. So I'm not going to use like serif fonts that have really sharp, jagged edges, right? Like all of those characteristics came just from me understanding the meaning of friendly and doing language research around them. And we now live in a world where very few new designs come out underneath the sun. So these are patterns that you can just replicate. You don't have to recreate a wheel. And like Virgil Abloh says, you just need 10% of remix and you're in the game. So here's how this exercise works. We brainstorm, we select top picks, and then we are going to build a statement. So these attributes are what I like to use to give me a foundational understanding of a culture. Every user that you are trying to reach sits within some sort of a cultural pocket. The more natural that you can express the understanding of that cultural pocket, the easier it is for them to want to join and explore your product. When we go through this exercise, we'll then take it to the next stage where we will build what I like to call an MVP statement. And it's not minimum value. Well, it's based on positioning than the typical understanding of an MVP statement. We'll go through some examples, but the goal is for each of you at the end of this exercise to be able to give me a statement where I can understand your product, who you're speaking to, what your impact is, how you deliver that from a relationship standpoint, and what your X factor is. Everyone here should walk out of that with that today. All right. So first step, the way that this exercise works, we give a couple minutes for each category. And in that category, your job is to write as many attributes as you can. There's no right or wrong answer. If banana is what just comes to mind, write banana. The key, though, is you want to avoid any negativity. If you have a negative idea, flip it into a positive, right? If the culture is always late, then this person is always on time. Okay? If this user doesn't like to, I don't know, if this user is very introverted, we don't say this person is introverted. We say this person likes to have their own personal space, right? The reflection is we're always trying to put this person in a positive light. That really helps us when you start to do design research around them. So the first category, it's culture. What kind of world that they operate in. If your user is Nigerian, jollof rice. Nollywood, right? You can now start to build sort of an expression around them. What is the customer? What is their mindset? What is their identity? How do they see themselves, right? We were talking about your startup being in the crypto space. So they might consider themselves crypto savvy. I know when there is a really crappy transaction process in crypto, and I can identify it a mile away. So I can identify a really great transaction process, and I'm going to champion that. Voice. What is your brand's personality? Super important, right? Are they like a coach? Are they like a nurturing mother? Are they a sexy, sexual siren? Are they just an old wise man? Are they a magician, right? All of these personalities are reflected in your voice, right? So some examples. Apple. Apple's voice is a magician. You can see it in the way that they choose their language. Apple Magic. We make your photos reappear. They always talk in the context of this sort of magical expression. Nike. they're like the coach. Everybody's an athlete. You can do it. Just get out there, right? Some people like to play the villain. Trump. But there is always a personality that exists, right? And I'm not going to get too deep into like the deep expression of this exercise, because then we dive into archetypes and things of that nature. There are 16 brand archetypes that you will see in everything, right? But for you guys right now, just sort of understand what your voice is like, right? Are you educational, or are you championing? Are you nurturing? Are you kind? Are you academic? Right? Are you like the everyone's friend? It matters. Take a couple minutes, write a couple things down there. Even if one adjective comes to mind, just that one thing. It's super important that we have something in every single column. So when you guys get to voice, I'll give you guys about 5 minutes. We'll do the last three. An easy way to get something down is to think, if there was somebody famous, anybody that you could choose, would they represent your brand? I mean, for me, it's like Kobe all day, but that's just me. But if there was somebody famous, Thomas Sankora, Marcus Garvey, Johnny Ive, I hope no one here chooses Elon. Okay, so let's talk about the last three. Next is the feeling. What is the emotion that you get from using the platform? You feel achievement. Right? You feel maybe renewed, reinvigorated, a new opportunity. That might be LinkedIn or Indeed. You got a new job. You feel healthy. Might be one of the health apps. Apple Health, right? Do you feel educated? Do you feel supported? Do you feel seen? Might be a therapy app. Every single application that you use delivers a feeling to you. Important to identify. Take a moment, write that down. The last two would be a little bit more difficult. Ubuntu, community, connected. All right, the last two. These are a little bit more practical. Impact. This is really straightforward. Did I save you money? Did I help you move money? Did I help you contact a friend? Did I let you share an experience at the club? Like on Instagram? Real stuff. You won't post that. Right? What is it that your platform, your product delivers with a lack of clarity? You need to know that and own it. There are going to be many platforms that do the same thing, but how they do them and the story in which they tell to attract you matters. How many clothing companies are there out there? But how many make you feel like Nike? Or how many make you feel like Patagonia? Take a moment, write that down. If someone has a question around trying to figure that out in here, raise your hand. Happy to help you find out. So the example that I was using is Nike sells clothes. Patagonia sells clothes. But they sell clothes differently. Nike has a feeling of sports achievement. They have a voice of a coach. Patagonia helps you feel like you're saving the planet. The clothes have a lifetime value. What is their voice like? Their voice is calm, right? They're like a Sherpa. You know? They're like the old wise dude that you meet that's sitting at the top of the hill. It's like, hey, there's a waterfall over here, and there's some fresh blueberries around that shrub over there, right? They both sell clothes. That's the thing that they actually do, right? Under impact, they give you a pair of clothing. But everything leading up to that helps define that story. So to sell clothes, you have clothing. It's super simple, right? Some products you save money. Some products you transact more. Some products you communicate with friends. What's that? Really not that complex. But the key is for you to be able to articulate a unique story behind that. And to be able to articulate that story, you need all of these pieces together. Does that make sense? Okay.
you use Nike as well, because they don't know.
So Patagonia is a company that sells clothing for outdoor activities, hiking, climbing mountains, right? But what's unique about them is all of their clothing, they has a lifetime value. If you rip the jacket 20 years from now, they will repair it. Why? Because their entire premise is we want to give you clothing that you keep for your life so that you can stop buying all of this fast fashion so that you can start saving the environment. Right? That's their story. Nike, they got another Jordan coming out next week that they want you to buy. They're not here to save the planet. But Patagonia's core story is about saving the planet. How do you see it? Well, for example, on Black Friday, while everybody's saying, hey, buy this product, they took out an ad and said, do not buy our product. We don't want for you to buy another jacket if you have a Patagonia jacket. If it's got a tear, send it in, we'll repair it. How else do they prove that? They bought something like 4,000 acres of forest land so that it could never be bought and deforested. All right? What are they selling? They're selling shoes and tops and jackets and shirts just like Nike. But how they tell that story is what allows for them to have unique positioning and for them to be one of the most profitable outerwear companies in the world. Does that make sense? Now, that same premise for the rest of you goes for each of your products. You can carve out a niche for yourself if you have a remarkable story to tell. Okay, last one, X factor. This is super important. This is about characteristic. This is about individuality. What is that thing that only you can do? It matters. You have a product that you're working on? Tell me about it.
So we Bitcoin program.
Competitors? Yes. What do you do different than others?
Most of our competitors are customers which are purchase funds us.
That's next factor. That's next factor. And when you can layer enough unique X factors together, then it allows for you to have a really strong story. People don't buy your product for the product. People buy and jump on your product for the story, for the experience, for the community, for the cultural resonance, right? That's what you need to be able to tap into. If you said that to an OG Bitcoiner, they're like, what? For real? I don't got a KYC? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Right? So that cultural context matters. This is what you're trying to find here. This really helps you define your culture market fit. So I'll give you guys a couple moments, and then we'll move on to the next half of this equation, which is what is your minimum viable positioning statement? So take a few minutes, or take a minute, drop in the X factor. And then we'll move on to the next one. All right, question for those of you that aren't writing. How is this exercise for you? Any thumbs up? Good. See my man, but I don't know if you're going to finish up. Okay, so let's talk about this exercise. I like to call it the visionscape exercise. So what we're going to do is we are going to take the top attributes from our previous experience and we're going to craft a statement, Mad Lib style. Okay, so what we had selected for culture, the way that we had described our customers, our voice, our feeling, our impact, our X factor. We are going to take those and we are going to create our first positioning statement. All right. The way that works looks like this. You take a characteristic for brand, you take your characteristic for customer, for culture, for voice, for feeling. I mean, brand is just the name of your product, excuse me. For feeling, for impact. And we put this together in a statement. This is the shortest form of story that you will start with when you start to understand your product. And the more significant that this thing feels like, the stronger the story and your product impact becomes. How does that look? An example. Here's one. M-Pesa. M-Pesa provides resilient, mobile-first customers in a cash-dependent, trust-driven environment with a direct and community-rooted voice, helping them feel financially confident and become economically independent. Does that sound like M-Pesa? Right? Who are their customers? Mobile first. What is their culture? What is their environment? Cash dependent, trust driven. What is the voice like? Direct. How do you feel? Community rooted. What is the feeling that gets delivered? Confidence, financial confidence. What is the impact? Economically independent. Does that feel right? Does that sound correct? Right? Sports Pesa. I threw in the other option or the other extreme. This is now about betting. Technically, you're losing money, right? What are you? What does Sports Pesa provide? What is their community? What is their culture? Football obsessed, right? How are the customers? Well, they're risk takers. They're thrill seeking. What is the culture? They see sports as an identity. What is the energetically Kenyan? What do we help them do? We help them feel seen. We help them feel alive. This is what thrill seekers are looking for, right? And what is the impact? What is that what is the X factor? winners that give back, because they have their sports community that M-Pesa or Sports Pesa invests in. Is about project